I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darrell Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darrell Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darrell Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darrell Lee makes Christmas better. This is The 5 of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. The series where I talk to notable people about 5 of their defining things. The way it works is my guests always choose a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. The reason I devised this series is I wanted to create a slightly different way to gain an insight into the real lives and thoughts of prominent people. Russel Howcroft is best known as a high-profile business executive, Gruen Transfer star, and host of 3AW's #1 radio show. In discussing his 5, we discover, amongst other things, the sensitive family man and core values at the heart of all his endeavours. So, Russel, mate, welcome to 5 of My Life, but more importantly, welcome to the famous Sixer Club. That's my guests who have been suggested by other guests, and you were suggested by Wil Anderson, which means we've got the full Gruen set. Before we get into your choices, mate, would you mind just telling me about that relationship between you and Wil?
Well, it's a long one now, Nigel. So 12 years ago, I was invited to a screen test, and they put me in a seat that I still sit in now. And there was this bloke called Wil Anderson that was there, and I knew Wil in that I'd seen him on the television, but I obviously didn't know him personally. And then over time, we've become very good friends. He is a deep thinker, a thoughtful character. Just watching his comedy shows are quite interesting, Nigel. They're funny, but there's always a point to his comedy. He's interested in society. He's interested in everyone doing well. He's got a good heart. He's a good person.
So before I interviewed him on 5 of My Life, for research, I went to see his improv stand-up show.
Right.
And I was just blown away. I mean, I sort of thought maybe it was a joke and he did a little bit of improv. I mean, he just came on and did 2 hours, what do you do for a living? Who are you? And off he was going.
Bang, bang.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous. But we were blowing smoke up your backside on 5 of My Life because I really liked the cut of his jib, and he was talking about your role on the Gruen, which I don't think people realise how truly successful it is. I mean, obviously it's successful, but it's like one of the most successful TV franchises ever in Australian history. Kath and Kim, Gruen Transfer, that's the sort of level you're talking about. And we were both agreeing, sparing your blushes, mate, that is very, very largely down to you, because having a bunch of anti-advertising people on the ABC agreeing how slightly embarrassing they find advertising, it wouldn't really fly at the levels that the Gruen has sustained over a decade, because you love the category and you are a wonderful spokesperson and poster child for it. So more power to you, mate.
Well, Nigel, you know how much I love that industry and continue to love it to this day. And I am now not involved as I once was, but, I sort of am involved with it on the edges. But clearly my income relies on advertising revenue, so I still have a great interest in it.
Well, we're going to get into your choices, mate, and we start traditionally with the film on 5 of My Life.
Okay.
And you have chosen one of the 2 films that is the most regularly chosen.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's so, because they're 2 completely different films. There's Sound of Music and there's Cinema Paradiso. And you've chosen Cinema Parody, which I adore. Tell us your story behind that, mate.
It did surprise me when I saw that it was a 1988 film, because that is a long time ago. But it also shows how long my now wife Kate and my wife Kate and I have been hanging out, because I saw it with Kate. For me, it's the feeling that I get from it. And Nigel, I haven't seen it since that once. It's glorious, in particular when we get to the final scene where all the kisses are edited. And of course, it's about the music. Morricone, is it? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
just the most stunning soundtrack. And when you think about just think about all those edited kisses and then overlay those images with the soundtrack, it's very hard not to feel instantly, like a lot of emotion. And we've also, many of us have been fortunate enough to travel around Italy and just get that wonderful, the romance of the entire country. And also, really importantly, Nigel, for our wedding waltz, when Kate and I were married a few years later, quite a lot of years out later, there is a very small section in Cinema Paradiso, about 40 seconds maybe, which is in 3/4 time. Now, as you know, 3/4 time is waltz time, and a wedding waltz ought to be a waltz. So I remember just thinking about, okay, so what should Kate and I dance to when it's wedding waltz time? And I was a drummer when I was growing up, and in fact studied percussion. And perhaps that's why I remembered that there was a section that was in 3/4 time. So for me, the romance of the film, the fact that I saw it with my wife to be, and then the opportunity to have a 3/4 time part of Cinema Paradiso, and even now when I think back to actually dancing with Kate on our wedding night to Cinema Paradiso, it was pretty good. It was a beautiful thing.
Oh, I love hearing that story. And part of the joy of doing this podcast is hearing someone talk so movingly and authentically about something that's touched them so much, and you saw it over 30 years ago once and it stayed with you. That is so lovely.
Yeah, and it's that sort of European feel as well. I mean, even if you think about, say, remember same era, the Big Blue, Le Grand Bleu, and sort of a lot of people say that's an appalling film, but when I think about that film, I just get the sense of that European warmth, that the consistency of the sun, the consistency of the temperature, the diving into the Mediterranean. So it sort of conjures up beautiful feelings. The Big Blue. And of course, Betty Blue, same era.
Oh, I love Betty Blue.
Well, you love the first few minutes of Betty Blue, as you remember, Nigel. So do you remember the badge? There was a badge that was, people wore this badge saying, "Don't miss the first few minutes of Betty Blue." This is
I'm going to have to bring you back to Cinema Paradiso just for two questions, because obviously religious sort of dominance of that society that led to all those kisses being edited out and sexual repression and all that stuff. It is just in your life, in your early life, what role, and indeed up to now, what's your religious journey, if any, and how was the sex topic dealt with in the Howcroft early years? Was it never mentioned, or were you hippy dippy?
Do you remember the book Where Do I Come From?
Yes, I do actually.
Yes. So I came home one day and there was a book on my bed. So I don't know whether you would call that dealing with it or not dealing, or dealing with it at arm's length.
That's great.
Yeah, but I also
were you questioned about it afterwards, or were you just left it?
Just left it. And I also remember the feeling when reading that book. I don't know whether shocked isn't the right word, but certainly uncomfortable. Most definitely, it was an uncomfortable feeling. I remember my first pornographic image as well, which is probably around the same time. I remember precisely where I was, and I remember the image extremely well. I won't describe it for you, but it was a cliche. Religion, interestingly, no one's ever asked me that question before. I did go to Sunday school for a period, Presbyterian Sunday school. I don't really remember that either fondly or the opposite, just that's what I did. The school that I went to was a Presbyterian school. And if you asked me to sing Thine Be the Glory, I could do it for you. And, all the other sort of the staples, I haven't got a problem. Lord's Prayer, easy. My wife, Kate, is Catholic. And when we got married in her local Catholic church, and the wonderful Father Leonard, I wrote him a letter and said, do I have to do anything different? He said, no, just turn up. So he was a lovely man. And then when our first child was born, I said to my father, my now deceased father, my dead father, he died 20 years ago, Nigel. I said to my father, Kate thinks that we should christen Claudia a Catholic. And then my father rather wonderfully said, is there anything wrong with Kate? Which I've always really loved, right? So I actually really like the Catholic, operation. I like going to church occasionally, like Christmas. Although I have to say it doesn't happen so much these days. But peace be with you. Everyone turns around and says hello to each other, shakes hands. I like that element. I like people standing up in front of others and thanking for the simple things. I do like that as well. I don't practice religion, but I certainly wouldn't claim to not be religious and not think that the spirit plays an important role. It's true, I do think about my father every day. That's his spirit, and I'm grateful that I think about him every day. And if I want to call that his spirit, then that's also a good thing. And I'm sure all of us are the same.
Your dad sounds like a remarkable fella. He had the 3 H's: happy, healthy, and honest. What a lovely...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what he said too. Yeah, that is a lovely story. When all of us boys at a all-boys school, we were asked to go home and ask our parents, what do you want me to be when I grow up, sort of conversation. And Dad just said, healthy, happy and honest. And when I answered in that fashion the next day at school, I was proud of it, which I suppose is why I remember it so well. But I also remember the reaction from the teacher. The teacher was most pleased, as opposed to everyone else's answer,
Now, you said that you were a bit surprised because your film was quite a while ago. Your book, your second choice on 5 of My Life, is even further back in history. You've chosen the 1967 book by Cyril Pearl, which is a biography of the man that Banjo Paterson said was one of the 3 most impressive men he ever met: Cecil Rhodes, Winston Churchill, and George Ernest Morrison. And your book is Morrison of Peking. Tell us about it, Howcroft.
Well, unlike Cinema Paradiso, which I've seen once, I've at least read this 3 times, including on my honeymoon. I'd read it prior to that. So George Ernest Morrison, known as Peking Morrison or China Morrison, just an incredible man. He was an incredible young man, and as life went on, he just did it, just super stuff. So I'm going to say maybe as a 16-year-old or thereabouts, he walked from Queenscliff to Adelaide. That's a long way, Nigel. Let's call that the same distance as Melbourne to Adelaide, just about, along the coastline. He just did that for kicks. I think it took him a bit over a month. He then he actually did 20 years after Burke and Wills failed.
North to south, amazing.
He did the same thing by himself. Not everyone knows that that Australia had something of a slave trade. The Kanaks, New Caledonia, right? And he actually blew open that story. He got on a boat pretending to be a shipman. He in fact was a journalist, and he blew open the story that Australians were actually trading in slaves, Kanaks. He went further down the Murray than anyone had ever been. He went into Papua New Guinea. further than anyone had ever been. He got stabbed in the stomach, stabbed in the eye. He had started doing medicine at Melbourne Uni, but he finishing his medicine in Scotland, which is where he went to have an operation, because the Scots were awesome doctors apparently at that time. He then, I don't know that he finished his medical studies, I'm not sure, can't remember. He then went down to London, got a job at the Times, and he got a job as the correspondent to China. And he lived the rest of his life, which is why he became known as Peking Morrison or China Morrison. He's actually donated his library to the Chinese government. There's a Morrison Street there. He was at the Boxer Rebellion. He became the most significant voice out of China for the West. And, he wrote a book. He wrote a book himself called A Short Walk Across China.
Well, listen, Russ, at the risk of being pretentious, I'm going to push you here, because I was unaware of him, to my shame. And I'm
most people are.
Totally blown away. An adventurer, a journalist. He would do mad things. And this was unarmed when it was the Wild West, basically, everywhere. So you're reading this on your honeymoon. You've read it 3 times. He's the most remarkable bloke. What do you think in it? But beyond the boy's own, it's a rattling, amazing story. What do you think in it speaks to you? Why is that? Why have you chosen that on 5 of My Life?
Yes. I like that. I like the picture I have in my head of his library. He was a thoughtful man. He was influential, was probably appeals to me, Nigel. Yes, I think I would think that would be right. Independence, absolute, total independence, independent of thought, and quite happy to obviously, venture where no other man dares venture, which he did on, numerous occasions. I think the fact that he was both part of history and a commentator of history, so he was able to articulate the importance of events, and that must appeal to me as well. There's also a bit of a, this does play a role. The school that I went to, one of its headmasters was a fellow called Morrison. Morrison's that headmaster had a brother who was the headmaster of the school down in Geelong College, and George was the son of that Morrison. There's a house at the school that I went to called Morrison House. There's also a house at the school that I went to called Monash, and that is after Sir John Monash. I was the captain of the Monash House. Another favourite book of mine is the book written about Sir John Monash, who is also an incredible Australian.
Just astonishing.
Yeah.
I don't know why I've heard of Monash but not Morrison. I don't know. Anyway, that's
I think Monash is war, right? Monash is First World War, obviously. Although not just the First World War. He was in. There's Melbourne. When I turn on my electricity, that's because it's coming to me from the Latrobe Valley. Monash, was in charge of building the Latrobe Valley, right? So he was an incredible man. So yes, I suppose that definitely contributes to why I like the Morrison story, because in a way I sort of feel only a few degrees of separation away from. If I was alive at the time, I can imagine that I would have met him. Maybe that's part of it. Yeah, I don't feel too far away from him.
You and Banjo Patterson.
Yeah, yes, that's and there's that era of individuals. There's another fellow called Hubert Wilkins. Look him up, Nigel. Again, an unbelievable adventurer, Hubert Wilkins. In fact, there's a book called The Last Explorer, which is about him. He was obsessed with being the first person to go under the North Pole in a submarine, for example. He was pretty amazing. Oh my God. He, those amazing Antarctic photographs. He used to contribute to those incredible photographs. He went to the Antarctic quite a number of times. Hubert Wilkins. Anyway, so there's a little area there that I suppose I quite like.
I love it. Listen, we're going to change pace and we're going to change era. We're going to pull you forward to this century, 2005. You've chosen the lead single from the Gorillaz' second album, Feel Good. I'm really pleased to add this to the 5 My Life Spotify playlist. It's incredibly diverse. We've got choral music, we've got the Gorillaz, we've got hip hop, heavy metal, and courtesy of dear old Russell, we've now got Feel Good by the Gorillaz. Tell us about that.
Well, it's just the bass line. It's not very complicated. Look, Nigel, I like to dance.
Do other people like to see you dancing, or is it a personal thing?
I don't know, and I don't care.
Good answer.
I've never cared about that. I know that when I was a young man, I couldn't help myself, and pretty much remain the same to this day. I can't help myself. I just have to. And
so there's a corporate do, and someone puts a good tune on, you're up.
Yes.
Good on you.
Yeah. And, so that's... I remember, my mother would say he can't help himself. And that is actually... I can't really explain how true that is. And it sort of seems a bit odd. But I really genuinely can't help myself. And that song is the song that I can't help myself the most.
This is great to know, actually.
Like, you play it, you play it, right? And it's like, dun, 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 dun. It is a stunning bass line. And it's a beautifully constructed song as well. The film clip's pretty good, but my family all know what happens when that song comes on.
Now, the co-founder of...
when you turn 50, Nigel... When you turn 50, you're not supposed to dance at parties anymore.
This is great. This is the secret weapon. If ever we want to throw you off, we just slip that on the background. You'll be talking to Parliament, and then suddenly you'll be jacket off dancing. The co-founder of the Gorillaz, so not Damon, dear old Damon Albarn, but James Hewlett, when asked about that song, said that it was about the media's dumbing down of mass culture, which I thought was fascinating. Given who you are and the place that you hold in Australian society, and you've got a megaphone on a whole variety of different platforms, not just the Gruen, your number one radio show in Melbourne, etc. So I just would like to hear your view of the media landscape and how consumers currently consume it, because the world has changed since you and I were babes in arms. Tell us about that.
Well, obviously, I believe thoroughly in the media. And I believe in its importance in a democratic sense. My concern in the media right now is that it's become very binary. You're either for or against, and life isn't like that. Life is thoroughly grey, and I don't enjoy. There's criticism and then there's criticism, and maybe I don't even know where that line is, but you sort of know it when you see it, Nigel. And I get anxious with how self-righteous people can be. I would hope that I'm not self-righteous. Very judgy, can't stand that. Right? We're all trying our best. Is sort of my view on life. And so I do get annoyed about that. The other thing which does make me sad is that negativity actually is a business model. In an online sense, the only stories, or the stories that get clicked through the most, are the stories that are most sensational or have a negative headline, let's say. So you have to write your headline in such a way that it gets the most amount of click-throughs, because the most amount of click-throughs generates revenue. So this is a really important thing that we should all recognise, that negativity and sensationalism is actually driven by the financial model of media. I don't know how we get around that, Nigel. It's probably not possible. So I just tell everyone that that's the case, in the hope that we sort of do this with our eyes wide open, right? And you'll see it with journalists. Journalists will often bait the audience just to get that one line that becomes the headline, because that is what generates the click-through. And journalists, of course, can be the revenues that they generate can now be assessed because you can assess revenue by storyline. So that contributes as well. So look, in the old days, the front page of the newspaper may well have been negative, i.e. the headline on the front page, because that would get the sale, but that didn't mean that every single article inside the book had to be negative. Well, now, in the digital world, every single article's got to pay its way, and that does contribute, I think, to the overriding cynicism, decline in trust.
Yeah, in a way, it's terrifying. I've got a mate who's an editor of one of the better-known mastheads, and he half-jokingly says there is only 2 rules in journalism. First, simplify, then exaggerate.
Yes, yeah.
And you go, oh, my God. I mean, that only works because you suspect that's got a lot of truth in it. You go, simplify it down and then exaggerate the crap out of it. And you go, well, that's not nuanced.
No, I remember many years ago I was asked to contribute to the marketing of a new magazine, including what to call it. And I wanted to call it Grey Matter. Or it might have been Grey Matters. I can't remember if there was an S or not. And the whole proposition around the magazine was life is actually, in the middle. It's grey and it's nuanced, and it isn't as simple as perhaps the media might like us to think. Anyway, suffice to say that magazine cover never saw the light of day.
But what a great! I mean, I would buy it. What a great idea! What a commercial disaster! But I would like it.
Yeah, I know, right? So. Yes, and obviously the owners of the magazine thought that it wouldn't work. It's quite interesting, as I was doing my research around what to call that magazine, if you sort of go back to ancient Greece, the idea of truth was just a game, right? The notion of a debate in order to find out the truth was just a game that people would play. It wasn't sort of quite as we treat it now.
Your 4th choice, is this near Cape Schanck? Because I did a speech in Cape Schanck. When I was Google mapping Sorrento golf course, and as I sort of scrolled around, I think it's near Cape Schanck, which I know. So the Mornington Peninsula. Because I'm a Sydney boy, so I don't really know, your Melbourne luxurious lifestyle, but it's down that end of the bay. Is that right?
That's correct. Well, Cape Schanck is more towards Western Port Bay, and Sorrento is more Port Phillip Bay.
Beautiful.
So there's a peninsula, yeah. But close enough, Nigel. And look, and Sorrento is obviously named after the Italian Sorrento, clearly. And look, there's lots of places which are wonderful and favoured, etc. But Sorrento is very near Melbourne. Takes an hour and a half to get there. We go there as often as we can. The golf course is beautiful. I love playing golf. I'm not particularly good at it. I'm not that shit at it. I'm just sort of okay at it.
What's your handicap?
Probably early. I actually haven't got one at the moment, but it'd be early 20s.
Right.
Yeah. So not amazing. I haven't got a bad swing though, Nigel. Anyway, so...
Good dancer, good golf swing.
Yes, not bad. And I'm happy to play golf by myself. I'm happy to play with friends. I'm happy to play with people that I've never met before. I thoroughly enjoy playing with my mother-in-law. She's a good golfer, and Kate has taken it up, and I had genuinely the joy pre-COVID of playing golf for the first time with my wife. And it's wonderful, isn't it, how you go through life. And I'm now really excited to play golf again with Kate. And it's a friendly course. It's not too hard. Some golf courses can be very difficult and they can be hard to enjoy. This one is it's not that friendly, but it's friendly enough. The last 5 holes, a few rounds ago, Nigel, I actually parred the last 5 holes. So I now use that as I sort of try and get myself to sleep in order to get up at 4:15 in the morning. I just replay those last 5 holes and I just feel really good.
I've got this thing when I play golf. I play probably once a year, usually with my brother when we can travel in England. And on the first hole, he'll say to me, how often have you played? He plays twice a week. And I'll say, well, the last time was when I played you. Yeah. And so I play once a year. And you go, all right, so that should be fine. And then I will hit the perfect drive, the perfect fairway shot, and I will 1 or 2 putt. And he will say, you're a bandit, right? And I go, no, I literally, the last time I played was on this course a year ago. And then the next hole, I'll get a 10 and then an 11. Yeah. And I go, where was that first hole? Yeah. I was playing like Tiger Woods. I don't know how it works. I don't.
And this is part of the, I have this sort of fantasy that I'll create a label, a golf label, and the golf label would be called "There's no such thing as a bad game of golf." Right. Which I absolutely believe. So even you were with your brother, right? So you had a few hours with your brother. So who cares about the golf, really? And there's another thing about, I think, golf, and I like this sort of notion that men need to do something in order to have a conversation, and it's even better when they can do something and not look at each other as they're doing it. So golf, you're walking side by side, with enough distance between each other. You're not staring at each other. You're actually doing something. You can encourage each other, and you can have that conversation, and it can be funny, it can be dramatic, it can be whatever. But I do think it's a great place for blokes, and I know obviously women love playing golf as well, but for us blokes, it's a fantastic place just to enjoy each other's company, relax, have a laugh, and...
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. It's the perfect set of circumstances to have a relaxed conversation. Yeah. And I've got a sort of terror. I mean, I love my friends and I love dinner parties, blah, blah, blah. But the model of, I'm going to come to your house and look at you and we're going to do 5.5 hours of uninterrupted chit-chat. I mean, you are a lovely, entertaining bloke and I like you enormously, but you go, Christ, could we do something whilst we're doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, poker or, something.
That's right. That's why, it's why pubs have got pool tables, right? It's it's funny, obviously often in business life, we would go out with a client or whatever and sit opposite them for lunch, and I always try and find the table, so it's the L shape, so you can sit in that L rather than opposite. And I genuinely believe that leads to a better conversation.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Now, I have to push you on sport because you are an AFL nut. And you've been crapping on about golf, but mate, you are Mr. AFL. So, I mean, which is like the moon to me. I don't know anything about it apart from there's too many people on the field and Melbourne keep on losing. But you are.
Both true.
So tell us a bit about your AFL involvement. Are you still on the board of all these clubs? Or?
No, I was on the board of the Melbourne Football Club, which was a joy. We went through some, as Andrew Denton said when he used to be involved with rugby league, he said on boards like that you see the best and the worst of humanity. It's true. But so look, I'm still alive. I've been a supporter of the Melbourne Football Club my whole life. When I used to do speeches when I was on the board, the opening line was, "I was born in 1965," and every Melbourne supporter would groan because they all know the last time we won was 1964. So, yeah, we haven't won in my whole life.
Wow. Okay.
No.
Okay.
And we've played in the grand final twice, and both times it's been record losing margins. I am, however, on the board or the committee of the MCC. So that's the lot that run the MCG. So I'm still very close to, the ground and to the sport, and I know the AFL well. And I love the game. You do, I'm sure, have to be from the southern states to really be crazy about it. Although they're doing a good job at infiltrating the north.
We're coming on to your fifth and last choice, which is oftentimes my favourite one because people get traditionally more and more personal. And it looks like you might have as well, because for your possession on Five in My Life, you've chosen your grandfather's watch. I'd love you to describe it to us first and then talk to us.
Yeah, so it's a classic simple-faced Omega. The gold, it's probably 1950. And it is the cliche where my grandfather took it off his wrist and put it on mine. And my grandfather was very, very important to me as I was growing up. He and I spent a lot of time together. And now, even now, when I think about him, I would happily be the grandfather when hopefully one day I am a grandfather. I would happily just copy him. A gentle man, a generous man, happy gardening and cleaning his car, and a successful man as well. But, like the good life, I used to have to... when I think about the whiskies that I served him, I think he probably quite liked whiskey. I used to, oh dear. He liked whiskey, he liked ciggies too. And
how old was he and you when the watch was exchanged?
I would have been 18.
So he gave it to you as you're now going out into the world, take this watch, not a deathbed thing.
Yeah, no, I wish I could really have clarity on that, and I actually don't have clarity on that. Was it my 20th birthday? Was it when he knew that he was ending? I haven't got absolute clarity around that. And all I know is that since the day that he gave it to me, I've worn it every single day. And
that's so lovely, mate. That is just so lovely.
Yeah. And again, back to what I was saying about my father, I think about, he was called Popper. Ernest Bradley on my mother's side. We all fondly remember Popper. It's lovely that I get to put his watch on.
And are you going to leave it to, how do you choose? Are you going to leave it to one of your kids? Or?
Well, I've thought about this, Nigel, yes. And I think it makes sense that it goes to my first grandson.
Right.
Yeah. So I have two sons, as you might recall. But no, I think it seems right that, well, perhaps the reason I have it rather than his son is that his son died before Ernest. So my mother's brother died when he was a young man. He had 3 young daughters, and so Philip was his name. I didn't even meet Philip. I don't think I was even 1 when he died. He died of bowel cancer. I regularly go and have that check, and interestingly, Bowel Cancer Australia has just recently asked if I would help them be an ambassador for them. And so, of course, I said yes.
Going back to that, I just think it's just wonderful that you wear it every day. It is, although you can't remember the precise sort of era.
I should have done my research, shouldn't I?
No. But this is beautiful. It is. I find it very touching, mate. It is. Tell me the story about when he actually gave it to you. Do you remember what he said, or was it a surprise? Was it wrapped? Did he just clip it off his wrist and...
Yeah, this is for you, Russ, So, it's hard for me to find the words, Nigel, about him. I tell you one thing that he said to me, which I've repeated many times since. He said, it doesn't matter what you do, Russ, all right? It doesn't matter what you do, just as long as you're good at it. I think that's pretty wise. And then he would tell me all about, the best truck driver in Australia is Lindsay Fox, So, it doesn't matter what you do. You may have even said it doesn't matter what you do, just make sure you're the best at it. He might have actually even said it. It might have even been that, right? So that's, yes. I understand what he was trying to say there, So, just whatever you choose, just make sure you work hard to succeed at it. And I suppose that has resonated ever since, really.
You've clearly been fortunate to have incredible male role models in your life. What about the female presence, like your mum or whatever? Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
No, not at all. Well, I grew up with an all-female family, in that I only have sisters, and my cousins are all girls, all women, and my mother from very early on had me vacuuming and helping in the kitchen. But she also had made sure that I was, I opened up the door for her and walked on the curbside when going down the street, which I still do. Then lots of really strong women as well. My mother, of course, is alive now, very fit, very independent, strong. She's a pretty incredible person. And it's quite interesting as time goes on. I think everyone around her starts to realise, gee, this woman's pretty powerful, right? So that's nice to watch happen to her. And then that's Elizabeth I. My father then was married again to a woman that we call Elizabeth II, and she's an amazing woman. Elizabeth Glenn is her maiden name, and her family had a significant impact on me. Big supporters of me, Nigel. And there's no real reason why they ought to be. I was sort of parachuted into their life with my father when I was a teenager, and yet they have, to this day, are a big part of my life, and Kate's and our family. So that's a blessing, really, that happened to me. And Elizabeth II's sister, she was an incredible woman. Unfortunately, she has died not that long ago now, but she was a great and powerful woman. She had a publishing firm called McPhee Gribble. And so I sort of, very, very early on, I reckon I would have been 20, and McPhee Gribble had me to go and speak to them at a lunch. I don't even know why that happened, but still, it was that lovely, Melbourne sort of cultural. McPhee Gribble was Melbourne University, inner suburbs, ALP, Women's Electoral Lobby, that sort of world. So I sort of, got to see it, touch it. I'm not saying I understood it or understand it. And what else do I say? I feel thoroughly lucky. The women in my life, Kate, as you know, is a very big part of my life. Kate only has sisters, so that's interesting. I've only got sisters. All my cousins are women, and I married a woman who's only got sisters, and they're all great women. Fantastic, wonderful, strong women, beautiful women. And Kate's mother is a tremendous, a joy. Very well known around the Sorrento area. Funny and glorious person she is.
Thank you for fronting up that question. I just find it fascinating. I've got two more questions for you.
Okay.
The first is, you've had many successful roles, so your granddad would be proud of you. You choose something and you always excel at it, mate. So whether it's TV, radio, advertising, consultant, or sports board director or whatever, what's your favourite role if you had to choose? What are you most comfortable in? I know you love telly, I know you love radio. You just like them all, or?
Well, I do like them all. Yes, I do. Look, the world of advertising is very, very close to my total being. Why? Because I love ideas. I don't care whose ideas they are. I just love them. I love talking about them. I love trying to make them happen. I love what they can do. They're sort of the X factor of ideas, as you know, Nigel. And that's my tribe. I feel very comfortable in the advertising environment. The individuals is what I mean by that. You and I have been lucky enough to travel the world off the back of being in advertising, and Nigel, you and I are roughly the same height. That's another thing about advertising. Advertising blokes are all under 6 foot, so that's good. You feel comfortable.
They're all short.
Right. So, yeah, it's true, right? So I feel comfortable in that environment. It's energising. It's full of ideas. The but bit about advertising is that I love I loved the big work. That was the joy. And as the advertising world has changed, the opportunity to do the big stuff became less and less. And I had to be honest with myself. That was what I liked to do. And so the consulting world actually allowed me to get back into doing big things. Yeah, and I suppose if we boil it down, I like doing big, big thing, big impactful impact on the client, impact on the commerce of it. If I can impact how people are thinking, buying, I do. That is joy to me.
Yeah, that's the George Ernest Morrison in you, mate, I reckon.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's true.
Now we can come to our sixth traditional last question. Is who would you like to hear? So Wil chose you, and we chase all these people up. It's quite hard when people choose Barack Obama, but we are still trying. Who would you like to hear on 5 My Life next, and why?
I've been thinking a lot lately about another advertising gent. So I was thinking about Sean Cummins.
Sure.
And I think that Sean has had some significant success, and I've got a feeling he's got some good stories to tell.
That's a great suggestion. I think Sean's in New York. I'll have a investigate this evening.
I reckon he was creative director of George Patterson, and I'm going to say at 23. Like, seriously, when it was the biggest agency in the country. It might have been 25, but, pretty amazing.
That takes some self-belief. Russel Howcroft, you've been a total delight. I know how busy you are and how you got ludicrous get up at, stupid o'clock every day. It's been really generous of you to come on, and thank you for taking the format seriously and being just so fascinating and authentic.
Thanks for having me, Nigel. Good to see you again as well, and good to hear that lovely voice of yours.
The 5 of My Life was presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Producer, Alex Mitchell. Sound production and theme music by Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish.